In 1821, the Latin American Wars of Independence had been raging for over a decade, and Spain's empire was beginning to crumble. Argentina, Chile and Paraguay had already won their independence, but other parts of South America remained loyal to the Spanish crown. The revolutionaries' most important commander, Simón Bolívar, had defeated the royalists in Colombia the previous year and now set his sights on liberating Venezuela. He was helped by chaos in Spain. There had been plans for 20,000 Spanish reinforcements to go and help the royalist cause, but the king had been ousted from power in a coup, meaning that the reinforcements would never be sent. The royalists in Venezuela were on their own. Even so, liberating Venezuela wouldn't be easy. There were 9,000 royalist troops spread all over the Caribbean coast. Roughly 5,000 of them were stationed in the northern city of Valencia, and Bolívar knew that if he could neutralize those men, Venezuela would be effectively won. He amassed 5,000 infantry and 3,000 cavalry at the town of San Carlos and prepared to advance on Valencia. To distract and weaken the royalist forces, he sent 2,000 men to march on Caracas, which was only lightly defended. To counter this, the royalist commander de la Torre sent 1,000 men to defend Caracas, leaving him with only 4,000 in Valencia. With those forces, he rode out of the city and set up camp on the plain of Carabobo. It would be there that the royalists would make their last stand. From San Carlos, Bolívar advanced north towards the royalist stronghold. On the 23rd of June, he reached the town of El Naipe, barely 5 kilometers from the royalist camp. The next day, he would launch his assault. As Bolívar waited for the night to pass, a fateful moon hung in the air. The revolutionaries were potentially only hours from finally winning independence for Venezuela. Early in the morning, from the top of Mount Buenavista, Bolívar surveys the Spanish positions. The plain of Carabobo can be accessed through 2 paths, both of which are blocked by royalist forces. The western path is blocked by 3 infantry battalions of Valencia, Barbastro and Hostelrich. In addition to the 3 battalions, the royalists have 2 cannons placed in strong defensive positions. The eastern path is guarded by 2 infantry battalions under the command of Infante and Principe. Held in reserve on the other side of the plain is 1 more infantry battalion under the command of Burgos, as well as 3 cavalry regiments. The supreme commander of the royalist forces is the 35-year-old Spaniard Miguel de la Torre. La Torre had joined the Spanish army at the age of 14 and given his entire life to serving the Spanish crown, even fighting in the Spanish resistance against Napoleon Bonaparte. From the beginning of the war, La Torre had played a major role in fighting the rebels, crushing them 4 years earlier at the Battle of La Hogaza. In total, the royalists have 3,000 infantry and 1,500 cavalry and are well entrenched in a strong defensive position. Bolívar has 8,000 men made up of 3 divisions. The first is led by the 31-year-old Venezuelan Antonio Páez. Páez is a man of humble origins, and before the war he was a cattle trader. Later in his life, Páez will go on to become president of Venezuela 3 times. Under his command is the battalion of Apure, formed of men from Apure in the south of Venezuela. Páez also has a battalion of British infantry under the command of Thomas Farrier. Many thousands of men from the British working classes had volunteered to bring down the Spanish Empire throughout all of Latin America. Many of these men were veterans of the Napoleonic Wars, and, struggling to adapt to civilian life, they decided to become mercenaries. Finally, there was a battalion of 1,500 cavalry with whom Páez himself fought. Bolívar's 2nd Division is led by the 41-year-old Manuel Cedeño. At his disposal are 3 battalions of infantry and 1 cavalry squadron. Bolívar's biggest division is his 3rd, led by the Venezuelan Ambrosio Plaza. Plaza had been fighting in the War of Independence since its very start in 1810, when he was just 19 years of age. Under his command are 4 battalions of infantry. With the royalists well dug in, Bolívar comes to the conclusion that their positions are impenetrable from either of the 2 paths. He makes a plan that is bold and risky. Bolívar's 3rd Division will attack the bulk of the royalists head-on in order to distract them and pin them down. At the same time, Bolívar's 1st Division will forge a path through the undergrowth and flank the royalists from the north. The 2nd Division of Cedeño will follow them a few kilometers behind. At 9 a.m, Bolívar's men begin their assault. Very quickly, Plaza's division in the center comes under heavy cannon fire, slowing their advance. Even so, casualties are relatively light. With fighting raging in the center, the 1st and 2nd Divisions make steady progress through the forest, successfully crossing a stream and approaching the plain of Carabobo. The Royalists quickly realize Bolivar's plan, and General de la Torre sends the Burgos Battalion to meet the flanking forces. The Battalion of Apure is the first to make it to the plain of Carabobo and immediately engages the Battalion of Burgos with musket fire. Twice the Battalion of Apure charges the Royalists to engage them with bayonets, but both times they are repulsed. The Royalists begin to gain the upper hand, and the Battalion of Apure is on the verge of breaking. Just in time, the British battalion emerges from the forest to reinforce the Patriot line. The British battalion splits in two and envelops the Battalion of Apure, which withdraws through the middle. This buys the Battalion of Apure some time to regroup and recover their composure. On the other side of the plain of Carabobo, de la Torre assesses how to respond to Bolivar's opening moves. Assuming that none of Bolivar's forces are coming along the eastern road, he sends the battalions of Barbastro, Hostelrich, Infante and Principe to help the Burgos battalion in the north. This leaves only the Battalion of Valencia fighting in the centre. With the Battalion of Apure still out of action, the British battalion finds itself fighting against 3 Royalist battalions for almost 20 minutes. They suffer huge casualties, with 100 of the 400 men killed, including Colonel Faria himself. For paying the ultimate price, Faria becomes a hero of Venezuelan independence, and his bust still stands in Carabobo Park in Caracas. Despite the heavy losses, the British line holds, and they are eventually rejoined by the Battalion of Apure. At the same time, 2 battalions of the 2nd Division arrive. The fighting was fierce. The officers carried pistols, but the majority of the soldiers were firing muskets at very close range. The muskets were awkward and slow to load. While one row of infantrymen fired, the other reloaded. Each man could fire a maximum of 3 shots per minute. Eventually, the Patriots charge and attack the Royalists with their bayonets. Bolivar's cavalry has yet to see combat. They are taking an even wider and slower route to enter the battlefield even further north. Of Paez's 1,500 cavalry, less than 400 will actually take part in the battle due to the difficult mountainous terrain. Even so, Bolivar's men are beginning to gain the upper hand. The Battalion of Hostelrich surrenders. Then, as the Battalion of Principe arrives to join the fight, it's taken by surprise, and it too surrenders. The battalions of Burgos, Barbastro and Infante are ceding ground, but their lines hold. With both sides having committed the majority of their forces, La Torre decides to send his cavalry to counter Paez's cavalry in the north. One of the 3 squadrons loses their nerve upon sight of Bolivar's cavalry and withdraws from the battlefield. In the south, the Royalist line begins to crumble. The Battalion of Valencia is forced to cede ground and abandon one of its 2 cannons. Bolivar himself has up until now been accompanying the 2nd Division, and now he takes up position on a hill near the plain of Carabobo, where he can observe proceedings. In the north, the Burgos Battalion is surrounded and surrenders. The Battalion of Barbastro also surrenders to the cavalry of Paez. Paez himself has an epileptic seizure and he must be urgently evacuated from the battlefield. General Plaza has made his way north with the Boyaca Battalion and achieves the surrender of the Infante Battalion. In the midst of the chaos, a stray bullet hits Plaza and he loses his life on the spot. General Cedeno is also wounded and will go on to succumb to his injuries. At this point, almost all of the Royalist forces have surrendered. The Battalion of Valencia and 2 squadrons of cavalry haven't surrendered, and they are retreating north in defensive formation. Bolivar enters the scene, shouting for as many men as possible to pursue the retreating Royalists. They do manage to capture the 2nd Royalist cannon, but the Valencia battalion is able to escape. Even so, the battle is an enormous victory for Bolivar. 1,500 Royalist soldiers have been captured, and General de la Torre is on his way to Puerto Rico. The battle came to an end with heavy rain. It had lasted less than an hour. The victory at Carabobo was a major success for the revolutionaries. but it would be some time until the Royalists were fully defeated. The Royalist commander de la Torre was replaced by Francisco Morales, who then embarked on a campaign to retake territory. He did have some success retaking various cities for the Spanish crown. The fighting would continue for 2 years until the Royalists were eventually defeated at the Battle of Lake Maracaibo. While that was happening, Bolivar was campaigning in the south, fighting for the independence of Peru, Ecuador and Bolivia. The Royalists there would finally be defeated at the Battle of Ayacucho, and that will be covered in the next video.